So
That's
you
true.
just have to jump in.
I actually have a video coming out on Sunday, and I'm doing a stream with David on Monday. We're going to be talking to Solomon Anderson, and that's going to be pretty epic. So I'm looking forward to that.
Ooh, and that's my question for Natalie. I have a question for Natalie.
Oh my
I
God.
already decided that I wasn't going to make
I
any
didn't say-
statement
can I
on
just say-
anything because I don't know what's going to happen.
I just want to say hi to Natalie.
no,
I just realized I talked to you about your cat before.
You
I
can
said
say
hello.
hi to me, but
No, this is a question just about things in general.
okay. I would love to answer that then.
Yeah, it's a Wisconsin thing in general. My contention is the convicted persons, until the second that the judge says this is your punishment, it is still an adversarial process, and by denying a convicted person the right to have someone speak on their behalf at victim impact statements should be a violation of the Sixth Amendment.
It is a
right
violation.
to it. But Schrader didn't let anyone from Zach's family or friends speak on his behalf, and I think that was wrong. But because that scumbag Darrell Brooks got people to speak on his behalf in a different courtroom with different judges.
Same state.
There really isn't a good answer for that. I can tell you lots of fun stories about Kenosha, but it's one of those things that's really up to the judge's discretion.
And my understanding is that Schroeder allowed them to submit letters to him.
Yes,
so
they did.
He was able to communicate to them.
Yeah.
They weren't held incommunicado. And let's face it, in sentencing,
he didn't
he's the
read
sentencing judge.
Hang on.
Yeah.
He
read
didn't
them,
read them. He said he
Yeah.
skimmed them. And then he
Well,
went
skimming
into,
is reading.
No. But then he pulled out one. He pulled out Zach's sisters and said, she talks about horses and what am I supposed to do with this? And just like threw it aside.
Are you?
But he doesn't have to listen to people who are speaking to him
Right.
either.
But I'm thinking it's still a Sixth Amendment violation where people have the right, whether you pay attention to them or not, they should be allowed to have people testify on their behalf.
Well,
I
yes, and I
agree
agree
with
with
that.
you. And the problem is that I agree with you, but jurisprudence
That
is
is
what
a
it
problem.
is.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean, actually, this was something that I brought up to Mark Richards when it happened because, he's been an attorney longer than I've been alive. And he told me a story about how in Kenosha, they currently have like a pretrial holding facility and then the Kenosha County Jail. And this is before they had the Kenosha County Jail in like the 90s. And there was just so little room that in jury trials, they would frequently go straight from verdict to sentencing. And one time, Mark having a client being found guilty, Schrader trying to go straight from verdict to sentencing and him refusing, being literally like, no, my client has people who want to speak on his behalf. Like, I do not agree to this. And the Court of Appeals didn't care.
Really?
That was my
the Court
thought.
of
I
Appeal-
said
well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I take that back. Fuck the judge. I
With
just
what
think
Judge
that's-
Schroeder
that's
had to
the
say.
reality of the situation is
Gotcha.
you have to have a
Schrader
Court of Appeals.
retiring, so cheers to his retirement, Judge Schrader.
Yes, exactly.
You have to have a Court of Appeals that's willing to do something too.
Cheers
Well,
to
that's what I
that.
said when he first denied it. We were live, and I said, "So he's done this a lot, and the Court of Appeals doesn't care."
Yep. Yep.
And that was my gut instinct. The Court of Appeals,
That's the
that's been tried, and no one cared.
If it's never been an appellate issue in the past, I doubt that it will be in this case, unfortunately, even though we
Well,
all
and
wish
the
it would be.
reality
I was just curious about someone who actually lives and works and practices in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean that's
The
the best
Court of-
story I can tell you
Yeah.
is that story, and that story is like 30
And
years old.
Do I understand that
25,
this is
30
the
years
case where I didn't watch this trial, but this is the case where many of you feel the defendant was convicted unjustly? Is that correct?
Unjustly.
Yes,
Exactly.
Very unjustly.
Right. So I mean, I'll defer to all your expertise. I will note, however, that when we think about the criminal justice system, the controlling word in the phrase criminal justice system is system. It's a system. And the second most important word is criminal. It's geared towards dealing with criminals. It's not geared towards dealing with non-criminals. So someone who's actually innocent, who's wrongfully convicted, this is a monstrous steam era machine that they're fed into. And it looks nothing like justice to anyone who thinks justice is supposed to be any kind of replica of fairness, because it's not designed for that person. It's designed for the person who's patently guilty of some horrible offense.
Well, and
I-
something I tell my clients all the time is that if the
Mhm.
system actually worked, why would I work in it?
All right, and that's what I tell
As
my.
a criminal
by
defense
the way,
attorney, if the system actually worked the way people think it does, I wouldn't need to exist.
Yeah,
And by the way,
you-
Branka,
but
I'm not
the
a real
system
lawyer either.
requires that you exist, Natalie.
Huh?
The system, you are part of the
Yeah.
system, though.
Oh, I know, but I mean,
require
otherwise
opposition.
it'd be kind of like an honorific position. If the
Well, what-
system actually was just and only tried just cases.
No, I disagree with
then-
that. I,
Well, what I tell
part of
people
the
when I'm
system.
accused of being a lawyer, which I you know, 'cause as I was telling Branka, I'm not a real lawyer either. That was my favorite insult of the week, because I was talking about the evidence being allowed in to
The
trials.
love
and say,
goat
"Ha-
lawyer.
I'm
No,
glad
and
I
how
could.
does this
I'm glad I
cruise
could make
ship
your
work?
week, buddy. I'm glad I
this,
could make your
this
week.
cruise ship lawyer has the audacity to believe he can comment on evidence."
Yeah.
That was my favorite insult of the
Yeah,
week.
that was
Maritime
good.
law, is it even real?
Yeah,
What
that
I
was my.
tell
I read it
clients-
out loud.
and you know, my clients who weirdly are also criminal defendants in a lot of cases, I tell them that is, if you're looking for justice, you're screwed from the get-go. No matter which side of the coin you're on, claimant, defendant, prosecution, defendant, whichever, civil, criminal, it doesn't matter. Law is not about right or wrong at all.
Well, people
Law is
imagine
about
that,
what
that
you can prove.
people imagine the criminal justice system is like this magic black box, like an AI runs it, and you put
Yeah.
law and evidence in one side, and you crank the handle, and you get justice out the other side. It's
Yeah, and
nothing
you can
like
be-
that. That black
can be
box is full of people.
100%, yeah.
It's full of
You can be
humans.
100% absolutely correct, honest, and telling the truth. But if you can't prove it,
Can
Sorry.
I say something?
What's the definition of admissible evidence? Whatever
Yeah.
the judge says is admissible evidence.
right.
True.